Welcome to episode 17 of the Football Conversations on Eclectic Football Interest. For this episode, I was delighted to be joined by Clemens Zavarsky, the author and historian, to talk about the great Austrian Wunderteam of the 1930s. Clemens, welcome aboard. Just prior to the birth of the Wunderteam, what was going on in Austria as a nation, and more specifically, what was going on in Austrian football? Could you please set the scene for us?
Well, where should I start? Post First World War or pre-First World War?
You begin where you think is appropriate in relation to this team. You're the expert.
Well, I think it's because we're talking about the so-called Wunder team. It's enough to speak about the football in Austria, especially to be more specific, the football in Vienna in the 1920s, because basically what we call Austrian football in prior to the Second World War took part in Vienna. There was football in the countryside as well, in Salzburg and Graz and so on, but it was not that famous, and they didn't play in the first league. They all had their own leagues, their own city leagues, and also the goalkeeper of the Wunder team, Rudi Hieden, was born in Graz, so he was from Styrian origin, but came to Vienna when he was very young. So when we speak about Austrian football prior to the Wunder team, or prior to the Second World War, it's basically football in Vienna, and it had a very, very important change in 1924, 1925, when we skipped the amateurism and started to do a professional league. Basically, it was a professional league, just what we would say in German, on the paper. So the teams paid the players, but you couldn't live from the salary they paid the players. There were a few players like Josef Uredil and later on Matthias Schindler who earned a lot of money in that time, as in comparison to today. Mm-hmm. But most of the players, we call them battle profis, but it's beggar pros, so to say. They couldn't live out of this professionalism, and so this kind of professionalism in Austria was criticized heavily, also by the neighboring countries. Germany stick to amateurism, I think, till the Second World War. I think so, and also in France and so on, they was heavily criticized that the Austrians are paying for playing football. But the good thing in this occasion was also that Austrian football had some sort of crisis. We were good, but we weren't that good. And because we started to pay our players, a lot of very famous players from Hungary joined the Austrian teams, like the Konrad brothers, who went to Austria Wien, and Bela Gutmann, who joined Hakoah. And they all earned money with football, and they weren't allowed in Hungary, and they were very important for the Austrian football system, what was later called Wiener Schule, a Viennese school. Maybe you've heard about that. And it's said that the Wunder team also played this system of Wiener Schule, but the Wunder team already played an advanced version of the Wiener Schule. Wiener Schule is concept of the Scottish football at the time, the Hungarian football, and a little bit Czech football. There's a lot of elegance, a lot of short passes, quick passes, let the ball run, not the players run, so to say. And it's very different from the English style, this kick and rush. It was the complete opposite. And Hugo Meisl was in favor of the English system as well, but he knew that he had to implement the Wiener Schule into this Wunder team system, because otherwise he would have been kicked out of the country, I think, because the Austrians were very proud of this system. And this all started to change around 25, 26, when the professionalism began in Austrian football.
Well, you just mentioned his name there, Clemens. I was just going to ask you, Well, who exactly was Hugo Meisl? What was his background prior to coaching Austria? And I suppose, to use a modern term, what was his philosophy on football?
It's a very well, his philosophy of football I almost explained right now, but his Jewish origin. He was born in the Czech, in the what now is the Czech Republic. At that time was part of Austrian-Hungarian monarchy,
Hmm.
and he was son of his father owned a bank, and he also started working with a bank, but he fell in love with football at very young age. And I think he took his first position as a manager, so to say, of a Viennese football club when he was 23. This was the
Okay.
first Vienna Cricket and Football Club, the second oldest club in Austria. And he was basically responsible for everything. He was a referee, he was a manager, he was coach, he was player, he was journalist. So, and he spoke, I think, by the end of his life, he spoke 9 languages. And he very early started to connect with, especially the British Football Union. So with the Scottish, the English, and the Irish at the time. He very soon connected with Italian football. Also, he didn't like the Germans, but he also connected with the Germans, and of course with the neighboring countries, Hungarians and the Czech Republic, especially with Hungary. He had very good connections with the Hungarian Football Association, because he also has he brought more or less all these Hungarian football players I mentioned before. It was
Yeah.
Hugo Meisl's work to get them to Austria and place them on different clubs. His philosophy, he fought in the First World War and became very high decorated soldier.
Hmm.
There is a discussion actually right now, because I studied the First World War in Austria and Hungarian monarchy a lot, and
Hmm.
by the end, Meisel worked for the and was more or less head of the press quarter in Vienna, not the highest rank, but somehow. And for that, he was also responsible for propaganda.
Right.
And so there is a slightly discussion if he, yeah, he was not a war criminal.
Yes.
Couldn't say that, but I think he did some things which weren't very nice.
Yeah.
The problem is that our archives in Vienna have been bombed in the Second World War, so it's almost nothing left from what Hugo Meisl did in the First World War. But he learned there a lot of discipline, and he was, like I said before, he was very fond of the English system, which with discipline, hard work, a lot of running, and so on. And he had to combine. So he wasn't the inventor of the Wiener Schule, like I mentioned before, but he used it as well. He also liked the Scottish system with the short passes, quick passes. He tried to combine them, and that was the reason for the success of the Wunderteam at the beginning of the 1930s. But actually, he was. Well, I explained it other way. He was very fond of the English system, but he also criticized it. He criticized it in the mid of the 1930s when he said the English system is still the best, but they have to improve. It's
Yeah.
not just kick and rush. It can't be kick and rush forever. There has to be an improvement, like Austria improved with the short pass system and the elegant system. But he
Hmm.
was very fond of discipline and hard work.
Well, interestingly, when you mention English football there, one of the key components of the Wonder Team, certainly on the staff, was an English coach, Jimmy Hogan.
Jimmy Hogan, yes.
Who exactly was he? How did he become involved with the Austrian national side, and what was his influence on the side?
Jimmy Hogan brought this Scottish short pass system to Austria. He was I don't even know if he was a first division player in England when he was a football player with Fulham. I remember, but I think Fulham was second division at that time, and he came to Austria in 1912.
Hmm.
Austria did a pre-game before the Olympics in Stockholm against Hungary, and Hugo Meisl was already coach at the time, and he realized that he needs a trainer. He was the manager. He needs someone who takes care of the tactical system of the fitness of the players and so on. And the referee of that game against Hungary was an Englishman, Hawcroft, I think it was his name, Joe Hawcroft. And Meisl asked him, "Do you know someone?" And he was befriended with Jimmy Hogan, and he said, "Yeah, I know Jimmy Hogan, and he's already here, and he can help you." And this is the way Jimmy Hogan came to continental Europe, more or less, because he influenced not only the Austrian football, he influenced also the Hungarian Golden 11 later on, because he trained MTK Budapest during the First World War. And I think that the coach of the Golden Team of Hungary, Gustav Sebes, later said, "Everything we know about football, we know from Jimmy Hogan."
Right.
And
so he was well thought of at the time.
He was well ahead of the time, because that's also what he criticized the English football very early for just being kick and rush, and this is where Hugo Meisl took his influence as well. And he trained all over Europe. He came to Austria. He trained Austria Wien for some time. He trained MTK Budapest. He trained a German side in Dresden, where he met Helmut Schön, the later famous coach of the World Cup winning team in '74. They all learned from him. And he was not with the Wunderteam from the beginning. It was from time to time. Meisl more or less called him when he needed him. And he did quite revolutionary things, like today is very common that you call up the players and a week before the game, and then you have a training camp and so on. Nobody did this at the time, and Jimmy Hogan invented it. And he said, we have to meet before, we have to take camps, we have to meet on regular basis. And this was very, very revolutionary at the time. And he made just one big mistake with the players were made. Well, he was also later on, when he visited Austria, so in the 50s and the 60s, he was always a very warm welcome with the Austrian football side. There was somehow, I remember an old journalist told me, it was, I can't remember the year, but I think it was a game against England in the 1960s, in the early 1960s in Vienna, and Jimmy Hogan was invented for this game. There was a banquet after the game, and players were all sitting on the tables, and suddenly the door opened and an old man came in, and everyone stood up and applauded, especially the English. And some of the players said, who is this guy? Who is this? And said, "This is Jimmy Hogan. This is the famous coach of the Wunderteam," and so on. So this is how you can see that he was very famous in Austria, later on. And now I missed what I wanted to say. And now, yes, the game against England at Stamford Bridge in December 1932, the most famous game of the Wunderteam. There is a heavy criticism on Jimmy Hogan, because the Austrian players were used that Hugo Meisl will talk to them before the game, and basically he will say, "Go out and play your game." And Jimmy Hogan made one mistake. He always he really constantly repeats how good English are.
Yeah,
they are so strong, they're so fast, they're so good, they're the best team in the world, and blah blah blah. And the Austrian players became scared.
Puts a doubt in the mind.
Yeah. Yes. And Josef Smistig, one of the Wunderteam players, later said that was the problem with Hogan. He always said they're so good, they're the best, and so on and so on. And then when he was finished with his half an hour monologue, I just said, "Jimmy, okay, then just tell us what to do."
Yeah.
And he couldn't. And so this is this. Yeah, we don't know if Austria would have win this game if Jimmy Hogan would just have said go out and play. But yeah, it's the Wunderteam players later called this anecdote that Jimmy Hogan was always saying the English are so good and so good, and they became the mind was full with, oh, England is good.
Yeah. Well, you just mentioned there a famous game against England. I was actually just going to ask you, when did people begin to notice that this side was pretty special? What sort of statement wins did they get?
It was They were first called Wunderteam after the second game, what we call the Wunderteam era against Germany. They were beating Scotland in Vienna 5-0 in May 31. And I think a week later they went to Berlin and were beating, I think it was in Berlin, or was the first game in Vienna? Was maybe the other way around. Doesn't matter. It was the second game they played against Germany, and they won 6-0, and the German press used the term Wunderteam for the first time.
So that's where it came.
Yeah. And that's when, I think it came into common mind after Second World War. It's not that they called it Wunderteam, but the way we call it today, it was not the precise term at that time. It came later, but it was called the first time after the second game against Germany.
So the legend kind of grew afterwards. Yeah.
Especially with the death of Schindler in 1939 and Hugo Meisl's very early death.
Yes,
the legacy began to grow and grow.
What made them stand out from other sides of the period?
Well, at first, it is this sort of system they played, the sort of the style of football they played, and this winning streak. I think they were when they beat Scotland 5-0. It was the first time Scotland lost in continental Europe. They never lost a game before. Then there was always
they've lost plenty since. They've lost plenty since then.
Yeah. And there was, I think, the best game of the Wunderteam against Hungary. That they won the game 8-2. 8-2. And years later, Rudi Heden, the goalkeeper, was interviewed about this game, and he said, everybody just hears the result, 8-2. We scored 8 goals, we received just 2. And you might think that there is no need for a goalkeeper.
Yeah.
I said, but it's not true. Hungary was attacking, and Austria was just playing very efficient. I said Schindler played the game of his life with 3 goals and 4 assists, or 4 goals and 3 assists, the other way around, I don't know. And I said we were bloody efficient. We played them like schoolboys, but they were attacking. And we scored 8 goals, and they just scored 2. And I think this is what made them different. That they really they had no. There was no opponent who could even barely match them. And this is why when they came to England in 1932, and there was this hope, so to say, in continental Europe, that this side may be the first side to beat the English on home soil. But well, it took another 20 years.
So you just mentioned his name there. The undoubted star of the Wunderteam was Schindler. So what sort of player was he? What kind of modern comparison, if any, could be made? And I suppose, what also do we know about Schindler, the man, away from football?
I did a special issue about Schindler a few years ago for the Ballesteros Football magazine, and there is a lot of legacy about Schindler, of course, because he died very young with just 36. Still, it's a lot of myths and rumors around his death. There is this myth that he was killed by the Gestapo. There is this because he had a Jewish wife, woman with him at that night. Utterly bullshit, but it doesn't matter. There is this myth that they committed suicide because of some love issues and so on. The common reason for this, he was poisoned by a don't know the English word for coal monoxide. I'm sorry.
Is it carbon monoxide poisoning?
Yeah. Because of the no, bin ich schon ganz tipper. Where I have to Google the English words. There's not even Austrian terms I have to use.
That's fine.
A chimney, a broken chimney.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's because and they got poisoned and they died. This is the common reason for his death, and I think it's the the most logic one, but of course, because he was so young and at that time,
They wanted a reason.
It was easy to build some myth around him. For him as a football player, it's also very, very funny because he was also always described it as he was a very elegant player. His technique was magnificent. He was maybe he was the best player in the world at that time. I don't know, but for sure he was the best player in Austria at that time. And there was this rumor because he was so thin and he had very, very low body fat. He looked so skinny. And one spectator on the football field called him the Papierennet, a guy made of paper, because he was so slightly and so easy, blow away by the wind, so more or less. But he was very young at that age. But it's not true, because Schindler was at this time, he was 1.75 meters and had 73 kilograms. He was as big and as heavy as Bobby Charlton, as Pelé, as Zinedine Zidane, as Luis Figo. It's the same. He wasn't skinny. He was skinny, but he was actually a normal size and normal built for that time. But yeah, he looked just so skinny, and what also was a reason for that was, like I said, his really elegant play. He almost played. I think, I don't know if it's the correct translation, bodiless. He didn't need to go into a infight or a sliding tackling or something like that. He could do it. Also, the newspapers at that time wrote that he was not a Neymar who was falling around all the time. He stood his ground, so that was not a problem. But it's also one of this myths around him that he had to fight. He was just dancing. He was dancing waltz with the ball and so on. This romantic picture people had from him, and this was for a very long time. This was very present. There is also this really a funny story about him, that he played for a second tier club in this district in Vienna, for Hertha, called SPC Hertha, and Austria Wien, and later on Austria Vienna, the football club, wanted to buy two of his friends for their squad, and their friends said, "No, we only go to you when you take Schindler and Matthias Schindler as well." And the Austria said, "Okay, well, let's take him, this little boy." And the rumor says that they were afterwards shocked what good player they got. It was the other way around. The Austria Wien already looked. He was the most outspoken and most. He was the biggest talent in Viennese football in the beginning of the 1920s. Everyone wanted to buy Schindler. So also Austria Wien. It was the other way around. They wanted Schindler, and Schindler said, "I'll come to Austria Wien if you take my two friends as well." And he was from his personal type. He was very, very shy and introvert. Didn't look for publicity or so on. He did some advertisements, we know that, and he also did in 1938 an advertisement for the Anschluss, like most of the other sportsmen as well. And he also took over a coffee shop from a Jewish owner in 1938. Arisierung, we call it. I don't know if it's what the English term is. Which was heavily criticized. And at the beginning of the 1980s, when 1990s, when Austria started to rethink their role in the Third Reich, things like that came to surface. And at the beginning, there was the story that Schindler paid a fair amount of money to this Jewish owner, which was complete bullshit. He just took over, and this is why he's also still he is, like I said, maybe the best footballer Austria Wien ever had. But speaking of him, naming a stadium after him or naming a street after him in Vienna, for me, I would say no. You shouldn't do that. You could part the sportsman from the personal figure, but it's when it comes to this, then you shouldn't name a stadium after him.
No, it's a bit controversial. Who were the other stars of the team?
Of the Wunderteam?
Yes. Schindler's obviously the well-known guy.
The goalkeeper, Rudi Hieden. He got very famous later on as a some sort of high society figure in Paris. Actually, on his way back from the England game, they stopped in Paris, and they had it wasn't a game of the national team, but they dropped by with them. They played just ordinary Austrian 11 against the Paris club, and then an Austrian football trainer in Paris just kept Rudy Heeden there and said, "Stay with me, play here." And then he took he bought a bar, but he was not very of a businessman, so he got broke, and most of them died more or less poor.
Okay, yeah.
Rudi Heeden was one of the big stars, and the defender Karl Sester, who was also playing for Austria Wien and for WRC. I think all the five forwards, besides Schindler, Fritz Schweidl from the Vienna, Toni Schall and Adolf Vogel. Toni Schall scored the most goals for the Wunderteam, 16 goals, I think, in 15 games. And he also had 28 caps and scored 27 goals. So he was a 5 times best scorer in the Austrian Football League and so on. So, I think this might be the most important. Well, the biggest star was Hugo Meisl, of course, besides Matthias Schindler, from the players. They were all terrific, but if you're asking for stars, I think that would have been them, yes.
Yeah. So Austria, like some of the future legendary sides, I'm thinking the Magyars, and I'm thinking of the Dutch team of 1974. They didn't actually manage to win the World Cup. How did they get on in their only appearance at the World Cup in 1934? And I suppose, what were the other great achievements of the Wonder Team?
To begin with, the Wonder Team won more or less the first European Cup in 1932, but it was played in the league system, and a few of the games they played in this Wonder Team era fell into this league system of official football games, and so they won the 1932 European Cup, which was named after Gothia Cup. Was it named Gothia Cup? I think it was after a Swede, but I don't remember. Maybe you have to Google it. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
And in 34 they took part in the first World Cup, because when Hugo Meisl was very important in the invention of the Football World Cup in 1930, and actually there is also the story that the first Football World Cup should have take part in Austria.
Mm-hmm.
But the stadium, our now national football stadium, the Prater Stadium, wasn't ready. They built it. They finished it in 1931, so they had to step back from organizing the Football World Cup in Austria. So that's why Uruguay became it, and Meisl said, "Forget it. We can't play a Football World Cup with European teams in Uruguay. It will going to be a financial disaster, and no one will care about it." One of his few mistakes he made in his football life. And in 1934, when Austria took part the first time, it's really an absurd situation, because they had to go to Italy. I think they had 12 players at the beginning, because a few of them, they had to play league matches, I think 3 or 4 days prior to the first game at the World Cup. And there was also financial reasons, and most of the key players of the Wonder Team, like Schindler was 31 when the World Cup took part, and that was old at that time. 31,
Yeah.
They were already an old player. There were a few of them of the others as well, like Hansi Horvath and so on, who was not a Wonder Team player, but actually a key figure of Austrian national team in the 1920s and 1930s. I think he was for a long time the record goal scorer for the Austrian national team. But he didn't. I think he didn't play one game for the Wonder Team, but he was before and after that. He was a regular in the national team, and he was the second best forward during the World Cup. He had to play 2 or 3 days before the first game. He had to play a league match for Simmering, and there were a few players like that. And like the rest, was very old, and it was slightly misorganized. The Austrian Football Federation didn't quite care, so they had to organize their train tickets by themselves and so on. And it was quite an absurd situation. It's like everything in Austrian football in the 1930s, it always all came down to money. There was no money. The clubs had no money. Almost every club was I think, except the first Vienna Football Club, was because it was resident in the 90th district. Every football club in Austria was broke by some time between 1925 and 1938.
Yeah.
And so this and they still weren't really fond of the concept of the World Cup. They still thought it's just something that will disappear in a few years. And there was also the problem that Meisl again changed the system for the World Cup. He didn't play this WM system like the Germans did at the time already. And he tried to play a very defensive system with kick and rush, and the Austrian public didn't like it. And I think we won the first game, we won the second game, and then we lost the semi-finals against Italy. And this was, one of the biggest betrayals in football history, because the Swedish referee Eklund was paid by Benito Mussolini. And there was actually, and they kicked Schindler out of the game. So they kicked him in his back, and he had to be substituted and so on. And at the only goal in the game, I think that the goalkeeper Peter Platzer, he catched the ball, but the Italian forward just came and pushed him into the goal.
Shoved him.
But the goal was allowed. So, and rumors say it's all, it's everything from this game. There is no video from this game, from the newspapers, that there was a cross ball into the Italian penalty area, and there was one forward of Austria. I think it was Zizek, but I'm not sure anymore. He was right to score the goal, and then the referee came and headed the ball away. Because everyone knows by now that Italy had to win this World Cup in '34 on their home state. And Eklund was the Swedish referee who had this game. Also, was the referee of the final. So it's no wonder that Italy won the World Cup. And he was invited by Benito Mussolini to the banquet afterwards.
I think it was a preordained propaganda.
So Austria ended up fourth at this time, and it was a mixture of disappointment and well, yes, it was some sort of a success, but I think for the Austrian public, and especially for the Austrian football public, it was difficult to accept that the Wunderteam era was already over.
Yeah. Well, with that, what brought about the demise of the Wunderteam?
Sorry?
What caused the demise? What factors contributed towards the demise at the end of the Wunderteam?
Okay. You have to understand that the Wunderteam was not 11 players who played the same game, the same starting squad every time. The first game against Scotland, the second game against Germany, and then the one game against Hungary, the team captain was Josef Blum. He was actually the guy who had this nickname, Weltmeister, world champion, a nickname that later on Ernst Happel became, or inherited more or less. And he was already 34, I think. Yes, 34, 35 at this time of the Wunderteam, and he was the record player of Austria with over 50 caps and so on. And so he was already quite old, and he was the what Cantona was for Alex Ferguson, Josef Blum was for Hugo Meisl. And so he got replaced by Karl Reiner from the Vienna and so on. And a lot of players there was a core of 15 players, more or less, of the Wunderteam, who just started and then were injured and so on. The key factor in 1932, when Austria lost against England, they had two games afterwards against Belgium and against France, I think, which they won. And then the team fall apart because, for example, Rudi Hieden went to France. A few other players just retired because they were 30, 31, or too old to go on. A few of them just said, "Well, I'm playing 80 games a year. It's not useful anymore, and we don't earn money with the national team, and we earn money with our clubs." And yeah, a lot of them just moved abroad, especially to France, and you don't have to forget that some of them really got famous, like the mentioned before, Woody Heeden, and they had offers for movies and so on. They became big stars in Austria, and then football wasn't that important anymore for them. There was, like today, when we would say Lionel Messi will play another football, or Cristiano Ronaldo will play another 4 World Cups until he's winning one, maybe. They really are keen on playing big tournaments. They weren't, because the Football World Cup was just too bizarre thing. They can't. They didn't even had if they would have won the World Cup, there was no money for them reserved, so they wouldn't have been paid for the World Championship. So no one cares. But I think the biggest reason for the demise was that a lot of players went abroad to earn more money, because in Austria you couldn't earn money with football.
Yeah. What is the lasting legacy of the Wonder Team in Austria and on the game of football itself in a wider sense? How have they influenced?
I think it's it's really a funny question, because I think it's some sort of what the Austrian mind is very good at. We also are still very fond of Sisi and Franz and our monarchy things and so on, because it's a time where Austria was big and Austria was great and Austria was powerful and so on. And that's the same thing. And there are a few things like that. It's and the same thing with the Wonder Team. The Wonder Team is from an era no living person saw the Wonder Team playing, but everyone is telling with football, times of the Wonder Team, Austria were big and we were powerful. It was the last time we were powerful. And even with all the later on national teams in 54 and 78, no one was ever as good as the Wonder Team, and we were so good. And it's this some sort of Austrian likes to think of them, the good old times. Good old times when we were somewhere, somebody, when we were big and strong. And maybe that if you if you bring it down to names, then I think the lasting legacy of the Wonder Team is Matthias Schindler.
Yeah.
Maybe if you ask a football fan on the street in Austria, name 3 players of the Wonder Team, everyone would mention Schindler.
Yeah. And I suppose finally, last question, where do the Wonder Team rank in the long list of football's greatest ever sides?
You mean international? Like you said, the Dutch team, the Hungarian team?
International. Where do they, on the whole league table, where are they?
Oh. That's a tough question. Personally, I think it's so we're speaking about sides, also not only teams who didn't win anything, so also teams like Brazil 1970 or something like that. So also Okay. Well, I think then I'm not a big fan of Brazil, actually, but I think we have to go with the Brazil 1970, Brazil 1982, then Hungary, Golden Team, then Dutch 1974, and then comes the Wonder Team.
Okay. Well, you are the expert, Clemens, so we'll take your word on that. But listen, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. It's been a privilege and an education to talk to you about the Wonder Team.